So, another day, another video, another walk. Bit better this time, not so much rain. It's still wet on the floor, cloudy overhead, but there's some blue sky. Hope it's better wherever you are in the world. Anyway, on to the topic at hand, rugby. This week is the first week of the Sirens of the European Rugby Championship, or the Champions Cup, the Investec Champions Cup. As another sponsor comes in, again, weird that it changes so much. I swear back in the day, especially with Premiership, Heineken Cup as well, they used to have the Guinness Premiership and the Heineken Cup, and those used to be household names, right? They never really changed. And then I felt like the more time that's gone on, every year there's a different sponsor, and I don't know why. But anyway, some good European rugby coming up. I've got some great games ahead of us for the next 2 weeks. So I just thought I would do this video to talk about what I'm going to be looking at over this weekend and the next weekend. So, I think the first port of call really for me is having a good look at these French teams. Now, in my time since the World Cup, I've been watching the Premiership mainly, been watching URC as well, and that was from your guys' recommendation. It's been good. I've enjoyed URC for sure. It's very competitive. I think it's still got some time to warm up. You've got Irish teams that are now bringing in the Irish players, South African teams. They've only been around for the last 2 weeks, so I think it's still got a lot of warming up to do. Whereas the Premiership, I feel like it's just been non-stop fire since I came back. And I honestly feel like it's the most competitive domestic league at the moment. Notice I say competitive, don't mean qualitative. And that's something that I really want to have a look at. I'm kind of blending my 2 points into one here. Let's go back to the first point. I want to see how these French teams stack up. I've not really been able to watch much of the top 14. The only thing I've seen is Harry Arndel's great offensive and terrible defensive performances. But I want to see how these guys look, man. Especially after the World Cup that they've had and the grassroots that France has. I'm excited to see how these French teams look. There's some good games and matches up they've got. Especially La Rochelle versus Leinster, which I won't be watching because I will be watching Leicester versus the Stormers. But I want to see how these French teams look in general. That's point one. Point two, which I was kind of blending into that point that I just made, is because the Premiership is, in my eyes, the most competitive league at the moment, because I feel like there are 6 or 7 teams that could win it out of the 10. I want to see if this competitive element of the Premiership translates to qualitative, if that makes sense. I don't know what the word is to add on top of that. But I want to see if this competitiveness translates to qualitativeness, if that's a word.
Is this a word?
And I don't know if it will or it won't. And the real tester of that will be for these Premiership teams to play these top URC teams. So we've got some great competitions. We've got, I believe, Bath are playing Ulster. I believe that's the case. That'll be a huge game. Finn Russell's been on fire ever since he started playing for Bath. I talked about in our last video, talking about the Owen Farrell situation, that Barbary should be in England. He's playing for Bath as well. He's playing very well. The Bath team look really good. Saracens are going to be playing, it's not the Stormers because we're playing the Stormers, but they're playing another big South African team. Christ, I can't remember who it is. It's embarrassing. But they're playing a big South African team. And I'll be putting it in the text down here who it is. I'm sorry, it seems really dumb that I can't remember a top South African team. But I know that they are playing one, and it'll be interesting to see how they front up with them. Especially with that way that Saracens play rugby. And especially with how they played against Northampton, because they did not look as good as they usually do. So they'll be looking for a bounce back. And of course, as I said earlier, I'm going to be watching Leicester against the Stormers. And I think this is a huge game for them. Obviously, if you just look at the statistics, Leicester are 7th at the moment. But what hides behind the statistics is that ever since these World Cup winners came back, World Cup winners, there's only 2 of them, in Jasper Wiese and Andre Pollard, ever since the World Cup players came back, they've looked a lot better. Right, sorry. They've looked a lot better. And I think they've only lost one game, and that was against Quins, and that was where all the World Cup returners looked a bit rusty, right? They didn't look themselves. And ever since then, they've played fantastically. They've played like Leicester did towards the end of last year and also the year before. But now this is a European competition against a side that probably play very similar rugby to what Leicester want to do. I think it will be like against like. I'm really excited that I've got a ticket to go and watch them. And I know I've got some South African fans out there, so if any of you are Stormers, best of luck to you this weekend, but I'm afraid the better team's going to have to win. Complete false confidence. I don't know about that. I don't know if they're any good on the European stage. As I said, that's one of the main interesting points that I want to get and find out about for myself. Does the competitiveness of the Premiership translate to a wider audience, wider competition of something such as the European Champions Cup? That's going to be a very interesting question. Third point, or fourth point, I've lost track. I don't care. Another thing I want to look at for the next 2 weekends, I want to see some of these teams, such as the Sharks, who've got some great players but have not played well. I want to see some of these teams kind of get a little bit more warmed up from what they're doing. I think we've had a little bit of a hangover from the World Cup in terms of the players. I think there's a few teams that have had some of their World Cup returners play very, very well, and they've kind of fallen straight back into place. I think some other teams are still juggling, trying to give the players the appropriate rest that they need. They're trying to make sure that they don't overwork them. I'm thinking specifically last weekend, Owen Farrell was not playing for Saracens. He was rested, and for me, this looks like it's a prime couple of weekends in a row for everyone that's come back from the World Cup to hit 4th or 5th gear and play some really good rugby. I just want to see teams from both the Premiership and the URC, and I assume the top 14, as I said, I've not been watching it that much. I want to see all these teams kind of hit that 3rd or 4th gear, and this is the weekend to do it. We've got a ton of really mouth-watering matchups this weekend against tough opposition. You got to get your points early if you want to make it to the knockout stages. These groups are tough; they're not easy, and this is the time to do it. I guess that's my 4th point. I want to see all these World Cup returners now come fully into the squad, put their name on the shirt, put it into 4th or 5th gear, maybe even 6th gear, a 7th gear if we're driving a truck, an 8th gear if we're still driving a truck. And I don't know if they've got any more gears than that. But you get my point. That's what I want to see. I don't know if there's anything else I really want to mention. Probably not. That's what I want to see. Top 14 teams. I want to see if the Premiership relates to the rest of the world. I want to see Leicester Stormers, because I'm going to go and see them. I want to see how Leicester relate. And then number 4, I want to see all the teams kind of hitting a 4th or 5th gear now that everyone has had a couple of weeks of their World Cup returners now playing some game time. So let's see this on the European stage. Let's have some great rugby this weekend, because this is kind of the peak of domestic rugby in my opinion, this competition. So that's it for me.